All right, welcome back, everyone. So, some news we've been waiting for a while. The social network that Trump has been discussing for a very long time now appears to be coming out. Now, a lot of media have been talking about this just as a social network that Trump is announcing. It's actually more than that. Trump's announcing a social network. He's announcing a media outlet, and he's also announcing a new entertainment company, such as with videos and shows and so on. In other words, Trump is not just launching a social network, he's launching basically an entire technology and media empire, very likely depending on how it goes. I'm going to be detailing some of what he's doing. Also, folks, a few other stories. Evergrande, this Chinese real estate company, the biggest one out there, it looks like it's about to collapse. It's accelerating on this. More happening with that. I'll be talking about this tonight. And also, folks, Biden is getting ready to roll out a mass vaccination program for kids ages 5 to 11. Going to be talking about this, a lot of other stories, a lot going on, folks. I'll be getting into this. Those of you wondering, too, I'm actually on the road right now. That's why my background's different. I'm actually broadcasting from Colorado currently. And, on the road working on some stuff. Hopefully I can tell you all about what I'm working on soon. I'll keep that secret for now, but some good stuff in the works. Yeah, folks, good to see you all here. Hey, Julie P. said, hello, Josh. Yeah, thanks for being here, Julie. Stars and Rockets said, thank God. Everyone's been waiting for Trump to do this new social network. We'll see how it goes. Mike Lindell, of course, everyone was waiting for his. Mike Lindell's didn't really turn into a social network. We'll see what happens with it. It does appear that Trump's is well on its way to happening. You can actually already preload the app. I'll be talking about a lot of the details on that in just a bit. Let's see. This is from Vicky Shoulder. Says, hi, Joshua from Tennessee. And thank you. It's Sandra Veneste. You said hello from Australia. Thanks for being here. All right, folks. That said, let's jump into the first story for the night. And as always, also, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them on the halfway point. All right, so first story up is Donald Trump. It says here, Trump Media and Technology Group and Digital World Acquisition Corp., which are public listed companies, NASDAQ, DWAC, have entered into a definitive merger agreement, providing for a business combination that will result in Trump Media and Technology Group becoming a publicly listed company, subject to regulatory and stockholder approval. In other words, folks, this isn't just a Trump initiative. This isn't just something Trump's doing. It has his name in it, but this is going to be a publicly listed company. You can buy shares in it. It's going to be on the stock exchange, publicly traded, listed on NASDAQ. Now, there are some risks that come with that, of course, such as hostile takeovers, such as boards of directors and them having to answer for some of that stuff. We'll see how that goes. Oh, is YouTube throttling us today? Hopefully not. Anyways, folks, it does mean it's subject to some of that. We'll see what it means. Trump typically knows how to deal with these issues. He's been in the business long enough where he knows how to deal with it, and he knows what the issues are that could possibly come up. We'll see how he deals with it. But one interesting thing with this is it's not just going to be like Parler or Gab or Getter or something like that, which are independent, so on. This is going to be publicly listed. You can buy stocks in it. You can become a partial owner in it if you have enough money, meaning that it's going to be a whole lot easier for this to become a legitimate and full-fledged business. And it's not just the social network. Let me explain this. Now, first off, it says this. The transaction values Trump Media and Technology Group at an initial enterprise value of $875 million. In other words, initial estimated value hasn't even fully launched yet, $875 million initially, with a potential addition earnout of $825 million in additional shares at the valuation they are granted for a cumulative valuation of up to $1.7 billion. That's depending, it says, on the performance of the stock price post-business combination. So we'll see how the stock exchange goes. It does seem to be the case that they're anticipating this new Trump media company. And again, it's not just a social network. This is a media and technology company. They're expecting it to pretty much skyrocket pretty quick. We'll see how it goes, though, of course. But it says here as well. Now, on that note, Trump Media and Technology Group's growth plan initially will be funded by DWAC's cash in trust of $293 million, assuming no redemptions. In other words, it's launching with about $293 million. Remember, folks, Trump's a billionaire. Yes, Trump was in office for 4 years. He was a public official for 4 years. But his main thing has always been that he's a billionaire. He's a international businessman. He has a lot of money to spare. And it looks like he's pouring a lot of that money into this new initiative, which actually makes sense. If you understand that, well, the way COVID has impacted, let's say, hotels and global travel and things like that, Trump hotels and so on, maybe they have a good future in them. Right now, they're getting hit hard. Might as well take some of that money and put it into a new initiative. It seems to be the case that he's hedging his bets, so to speak, that people might want a new social network and they might want a new media company. We get into it. It says as well, Trump Media and Technology Group's mission is to create a rival to the liberal media consortium and fight back against the big tech companies of Silicon Valley. You know that, folks? This new initiative Trump is launching, it's going to take on the liberal media consortium, as he's calling it. We can assume he's referring to the mainstream news outlets, CNN, ABC, NBC, New York Times, all those guys, right? Essentially taking them on head on, at least in the digital sphere, and also taking on big tech. Now, big tech, of course, is not just limited to Twitter and Facebook. It also means Google. It means, of course, any kind of back-end technology system like Amazon Web Services. It's not clear whether he's going to take on all of these or how far he's going to go, but he is saying that part of it's going to be to fight back against big tech companies of Silicon Valley. We can assume, given what happened after Trump left office. After Trump left office, what happened? Well, Parler got shut down. Everyone remember that? Amazon Web Services, Apple, all the core technologies denied their services. And that was a shot over the bow to everybody running their own websites. It showed them that if you step out against, or even not intentionally, like Parler, if the liberal media consortium, as Trump is calling it, or big tech, decide they want to destroy you, they can destroy you. They can cancel your business. They can cancel your credit card services, as, for example, some of the big credit card companies have done. They can kill your website by, for example, denying you access to Amazon Web Services or other things. And so we would assume that if Trump is going to be launching his own technology platforms, he understands you need the technology back end to go with it. And he is saying that he's going to be taking on big tech in general with this. And he says, which have used their unilateral power to silence opposing voices in America. Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, they're calling it, will soon be launching with a social network. This is their first launch. They've already announced a few others. They'll be getting into it. But the first thing they're going to be launching is a new social network that is called Trump Social. And Trump Social is already available for pre-order in the Apple App Store. And so it's already listed on the Apple App Store. You can already pre-order it, meaning you can, hit subscribe. It doesn't actually download it to your phone, but presumably once it goes live, it will automatically download if you have done that. You can sign up now. Actually, we'll see how it goes. If it goes well, I would love to have an alternative to Twitter and other platforms, and so we'll see what happens with it. Based on the images of it, it does look to be more of a Twitter replacement, but he's announcing other things as well. Again, this is just the beginning of what he's doing. I'm going to be getting into a bit more of what he's doing in just a bit, but folks, I should mention first, well, as Trump is saying, this big tech conglomerate tries to silence other people's voices. They censor people, and the show you're watching right now is, of course, censored by YouTube. We are totally demonetized. But luckily, we do have sponsors. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans were affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over this past year. People get anxious when they can't protect their data online or their online activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. That's Secur, that can give legitimate privacy when you're using the apps, especially when you're sending emails and sending messages. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, and that's because Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure is also the only private and secure messaging and email app that does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Cloud Act. Secure also does not ask for your phone number, does not mine your data, does not upload your contacts like all other applications of this type tend to do. Secure Messenger functions by adding people you know and then adding their secure numbers. You can also still chat with secure users by sending them an invite. In this way, you're protected from hackers getting onto your phone and you have full privacy while on the app. Now, it costs only $5 for the Messenger and $10 for the email and Messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial. You can also use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring tonight's episode. All right, folks, that said, let's go into a bit more of what's happening with Trump's new and newly announced social network and also what he's going to be doing in addition to that. Now, I mentioned, if you read a lot of the news reports going around right now, everybody's kind of mentioning that Trump is starting a social network. They're all mentioning, this, again, Truth Social Network, which he's calling it Truth Social. They're not mentioning actually that he's announcing an entire media and technology corporation, an entire media and technology, system, going to be doing a lot of different programs. And so we'll be talking about this. Quick note, the drink tonight is water because I'm on the road and I'm in a hotel. Nothing special tonight. But folks, let me get into this a bit more because, again, it goes beyond just this Truth Social, but there's a bit more to that as well. Now, it says here, Truth Social plans to begin its beta launch for invited guests in November 2021. In other words, maybe within a couple weeks. We'll see. Maybe within a couple of weeks, the beta launch will start. Presumably during that time, they're going to be looking for errors, looking for issues, and trying to sort them out. A nationwide rollout. In other words, when everybody's allowed on, when they're ready to roll it out fully, that's expected in the first quarter of 2022. In other words, it could be at least until after Christmas, until after the new year that we see it. We'll see what happens with it. I've been saying for a long time, those of you watching the show, I've been saying for a long time that Trump, again, one of his big initiatives, aside from this, is to get behind political campaigns in the 2022 midterm elections. He's talking about community organizing, right? In his own words, community organizing, getting people out on the streets, getting them organized. How do people organize in this new social media environment? Typically through things like Facebook groups, typically through things like Reddit groups. But what happens when Reddit kicks off pages like the Donwick, kicks people off the platform, like Moms for Liberty, a mother's group looking into, again, critical race theory being taught to their kids and other things like that. What happens when these systems of organizing are denied to certain people based on their political opinions? Well, what happens is that the entire technology system that pretty much we're all dependent on these days for advertising, for organizing, for communication, only serve one particular political alignment. And if you're not of that particular political alignment, you cannot organize, you cannot communicate, you cannot have advertising like the show you're watching right now. You cannot have a lot of things. And so if Trump is really going to be doing what he says he's going to be doing, which is getting involved in the grassroots, which is, again, community organizing, he needs a platform for community organizing. He needs a platform where people can communicate and organize and do things. He also needs a platform where be censored, such as, for example, one of the candidates not too long ago. It was a Vietnamese candidate, a woman, who had advertisements about how her family was persecuted. I'm not sorry, she was Cambodian. How her family was persecuted in Cambodia. Denied ads on Facebook. What happens then if you can't even run political ads on social networks? Well, again, you need to build your and the entire technology infrastructure behind it. Otherwise, they can parlor him. And we watch what happened to Parler. They can parlor him if he does not have the technology infrastructure behind it. In other words, he needs to roll this out prior to the 2022 midterm elections. And it seems to be the case. First quarter of 2022, we're going to be seeing this for a public rollout. Now, again, there's not a hard release date on it yet, but we can assume it will be not too long after the new year. Now, those interested in joining Truth Social can already, right now as we speak, visit truthsocial.com to sign up for the invite list. And President Donald J. Trump, the chairman of TMTG, stated, "I created Truth Social and TMTG to stand up to the tyranny of big tech. We live in a world where the Taliban has a huge presence on Twitter, yet your favorite American president has been silenced. This is unacceptable. I am excited to send out my first truth on Truth Social very soon. TMTG was founded with a mission to give a voice to all. I'm excited to soon begin sharing my thoughts on Truth Social and to fight back against big tech. Everyone asks me why someone doesn't stand up to big tech. Well, we will be soon." That's a quote from Trump. Patrick E. Orlando, the chairman and CEO of DWAC, also stated, Digital World was formed to create public shareholding value, and we believe that TMTG is one of the most promising business combination partners to fulfill that purpose. DWAC currently has $293 million in trust, assuming minimal redemptions, which can fuel TMTG's scale up. In other words, that $293 million, unless something happens to it, they believe that can be used to help build up this Trump Social and this entire media company that's behind it, TMTG, well, media and technology company. In other words, they plan on not just building the social network with that, but the other initiatives as well. And they say that includes to provide a world-class leading technology services, as we were saying, to provide world-class leading technology services to build strong and secure social networks and diverse media offerings. We can assume those technology services also mean back-end technology, which we've been saying they would need. Now, given the total addressable market and Trump's target following, President Trump's target following, we believe that the TMTG opportunity has the potential to create significant shareholder value. Those of you joining as well, TMTG stands for Trump Media and Technology Group. Trump Media and Technology Group, this new company. Now, additionally, TMTG intends to launch a subscription video on-demand service. Hear that, folks? Not just a social media, a video on-demand service. We would assume video on-demand would be something like Netflix, like Epic TV. Maybe we'll have some friendly competition going on. But they're going to be announcing a video platform, right? A subscription-based video on-demand service. That's going to be called TMTG Plus. And TMTG Plus, they're saying, will feature non-woke entertainment programming, news, podcasts, and more. And so we would assume that non-woke entertainment would mean that things not aligning with this whole social justice agenda. Maybe entertainment programming, we can assume maybe shows or movies or both, we'll see, that do not have this kind of woke, as they're calling it, or social justice type content. In addition to having news, so in other words, a video news platform, podcasts, and more, they're saying. Now, TMTG has named Scott St. John as the leader of TMTG Plus corporate operations. And Scott St. John is the executive producer of Deal or No Deal and America's Got Talent, and has produced over 1,000 hours of network and cable TV. Now, so what Trump is announcing is Truth Social, a social media platform, the one everyone's talking about. You can already sign up for it. Going to be doing its initial launch next month in November for people who are on the beta platform. You can sign up already for it right now and preload the app to possibly get on the beta starting next month. The full public rollout is going to be first quarter of 2022. We'd assume after the new year then. We'll see exactly what the date is on that. It's not yet clear. In addition to Truth Social, he's also going to have TMTG Plus, which is, again, the video on demand service. And there's also something that they've announced that actually they're not having in the press release and nobody's talking about. But if you go on his website and actually read the website, they're also announcing TMTG News. It's not clear what TMTG News is. I would assume that it's a news program. I would assume, or a news company. It looks like he's announcing some kind of news company as well, although there are not yet many details on that. So again, Truth Social, TMTG Plus video platform, and the TMTG News platform. Again, Trump Media Technology Group. And folks, get ready for it. He's saying in his own words that he's going to be using this to take on big media and big tech. So we'll see what happens with it. And folks, again, we'll see how it works out. We'll see what the impact is as well, because this could have some really big implications. Now, on one side of it, watch for these different social networks to react to it. I did check the stock holdings of Twitter and Facebook. It doesn't look like there's been a significant disruption on their stocks just yet. So we'll see. Maybe they'll see it as more of like a ideology-based competition or something like that. We'll see. Again, we'll see what happens with it. It does look, again, if you log on to your Apple App Store and you preload the app, I checked it out. The app itself, the service looks a lot like Twitter. And so, in other words, it doesn't look like it has a video hosting platform yet. So it doesn't look like it's going to replace, for example, YouTube for us just yet. It also doesn't look like it has the group function such as Facebook would have. I would assume they need something like that if Trump is planning on getting involved in, grassroots organizing and so on. Currently, it looks like it has the news feed, a friend feature, and also looks like it has, again, the ability to have chats with individuals who follow you and so on. We'll see how it is once it finally launches. Again, we're not looking at the final version yet. This is early beta launch. And so we'll see what happens with it. Details are still very thin on TMTG Plus, which is, again, the video on demand platform. And information is even more thin on TMTG News. But we're going to see something interesting. We're going to see everything that's been censored. We're going to see what people really think. And in terms of the bigger impact socially, in terms of the United States and other countries, this could turn back the clocks. Let me explain this. Now, folks, let's go back in time. 2016. Remember what happened? Trump was, running for president. Hillary Clinton was laughing, saying, yes, do it, run for president. You had a lot of people, Steve Carell, saying, yes, do it, run for president, because they thought that he would basically implode the Republican Party. They thought it was a great thing. Hillary Clinton's emails suggested that they wanted Trump to become the frontliner of the Republican Party because they thought he was going to implode the Republican Party. Lo and behold, the opposite happened. He changed the Republican Party in a way that they really didn't like. But remember what's happening online at that time. There was a very, very telling email from Hillary Clinton on her leaked emails, which said something interesting. It said, people are waking up. Now, they said it, of course, in a negative way. They didn't seem too happy that, in their own words, people were, Well, people are waking up. We're past tense now. But that tied into the social media environment at that time. Remember what happened? The biggest voices on YouTube were conservative voices. The biggest voices on YouTube were conservative YouTubers. Remember, they purged them all. They purged them, saying it was the alt-right and all these things. There was a purge ideologically across all social networks. They purged YouTube, again, getting rid of a lot of these channels. How many of you had channels you used to watch that you can no longer watch? How many of you used to follow people who you can no longer find on YouTube? How many of you watch shows that are censored? I mean, the show you're watching right now is censored, so that's at least one. They got rid of a lot of shows. In addition to that, too, they started censoring Twitter and they started censoring Facebook. That entire movement, that entire phenomenon that they saw happening was reversed. And one of the big points with this is they said it was the alt-right and they said it was a threat to the, the safety and online safety and all these things. They said it was to stop dissing the mainstream media. It goes against the statements that they're making, that goes against the worldview they're presenting, is somehow something that people should not be allowed to hear. And so they decided they should intervene on your behalf, that you folks, you're not capable, it's in their eyes, of being able to discern truth from false. And so they needed to have a back-end regulatory system to regulate it, to kick off the voices they don't like, to get rid of them, to censor them, to demonetize them, to get rid of them in every way they could. And what you're witnessing right now is the long-term effect of that, where not only, remember, it started with like Alex Jones. They kicked him off YouTube. They went after him. Then they moved on to other ones. Then they went after ones that people might think are extreme, ones that actually were like more alt-right, neo-Nazi-ish. Fair enough, right? Even then, it's First Amendment, right? Went after all them. Then they started going after just the moderates. Then they started going after you, right? How many of you feel you can make statements on Facebook, that you can express your genuine political opinions and not get censored? It went even beyond political opinions. Now it's even sharing medical information that you cannot do on social media. It's been a downward slide as they continue to control the information and do it in such a way that they don't want you to be able to talk with your friends, to be able to talk with your family, let alone have access to information that they cannot control. And what's going to happen, folks, when a new platform emerges, and it's probably going to have a pretty big impact right away because it has Trump's backing, frankly, and you can assume that anyone who supported him or voted for him, over 80 million votes at least, is going to want to jump on that. Not to mention anybody who wants to have, let's say, a platform, whether they agree with them or not. If you have a business that you want to have a good platform for, if it has a big enough following, you want to be able to access that following. What's going to happen when that happens? When you have a system that allows for that conversation, allows for those channels possibly to exist once more? Well, folks, the clocks are going to be turned back. Everything's going to be turned back. And you're going to watch the voices that were silenced possibly reemerge. Everybody who is silenced is now going to possibly have a voice. We'll see if it happens, but if that does happen, you're going to watch again political discourse reemerge in this country, and you're possibly going to watch a repeat of what was happening back in 2016, which is the conservative voices were dominating. The reason they're not dominating anymore is because all the conservative voices got shut down. But once again, we're going to see the clocks turn back, and we'll see exactly where things are at. We're going to see again what the genuine opinions and the genuine thoughts of the American people are once again, and probably other countries as well. The other side of this, get ready to watch some really unhappy media companies, some really unhappy social media companies, and some really unhappy politicians who have been attacking social networks, even like Facebook, saying they don't do enough to censor their users. When you're going to watch media companies have a very large and very well-financed competitor emerge on the global scene, even among conservative networks, you're going to watch this. Some competition, a new competitor entering the ring, and one with a whole lot of weight behind them. It's going to be interesting to watch. So folks, get ready for it, because 2022 is starting now. it seems. And we're going to watch, who knows right now, we're going to watch a shift take place, at least ideologically. At the very least, we're going to watch an ideological battle take place once again, where you're going to be able to have both sides of the argument coming together and really, I think, duking it out, at least on the internet. We're going to watch it happen once again. We'll see who the winner is. Yeah, get ready for it, folks, because it's right now starting. All right. That said, I still want to go into, while this new Biden, there's going to be a big campaign to get vaccinations for kids now, ages 5 to 11. But first, folks, let's go into questions because there's a lot to talk about. Again, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them now. But first, folks, also, I mentioned we have our own video platform, Epic TV. That's epochtv.com/Crossroads. And folks, we have a great one up right now. It's Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon. It's why communists are focused heavily on turning Texas blue. Now, if you've been following Trevor Loudon for a while, again, he's one of the leading anti-communists in this country. He has some really interesting information about, well, how Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, and other groups like them played a huge role in getting people registered to vote, and they were targeting different areas of the U.S. to turn red counties blue in the 2020 elections. And right now, their big target is Texas. Now, Trevor's going to be detailing exactly what's happening with that, where it's heading, and why they want to do it. So be sure to check out this episode that's, again, on Epic TV. I'll show you a quick trailer of that now.
Today we're going to focus on Texas. If Republicans lose Texas, it's all over. This will be a one-party state America going onwards. So that's why the Democrats and the communists and their Chinese masters are focusing very, very heavily on Texas. To save Texas, these networks must be shut down. That sends people to communist China. That takes directions from Chinese diplomats. So that is a grounds for an investigation right there. And when you lose Texas, we all lose America. And when we lose America, we lose the free world for about 1,000 years.
Yeah, again, folks, that's Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon. You can find that on Epic TV. Click the link below. You can find that in a lot of other shows there, a lot going on. And check it out again. That's epochtv.com/Crossroads. And also, folks, I mentioned before that we now have a newsletter. You might notice you don't get alerts for Crossroads. We have new videos up on Facebook. On YouTube or other platforms. Maybe some do, I've heard, but a lot of you don't. We now have our own newsletter to get information out. Also, we're going to be running the book club, the Crossroads Book Club on there. So be sure to sign up. You can find the link to that also in the description below. All right, that says jump into some questions. First one up tonight is from T. You said, Josh, are you familiar with Avi Yemeni from Australia Rebel News? He streams police interactions, arrests, violence against protesters, seems a very courageous fellow. I'm not familiar with Avi Yemeni, but I am familiar with Rebel News. In fact, I think I was on Rebel News during an interview back at the beginning of the pandemic. When the pandemic was first starting, I, of course, did that documentary investigating the origins of the Wuhan coronavirus, which you can still find on YouTube and on Epoch TV, where, of course, I looked into the origins of the virus. You can still check it out, and I encourage you to if you haven't yet. But during that time, also, I did a huge international media kind of push where just about every major outlet outside the mainstream, at least the U.S.-based mainstream, was having me on. I was in some of the biggest media in Latin America, some of the biggest media in Europe, some of the biggest media in other countries, including India, including South Korea, and a lot of other countries as well. And Rebel News, actually, I believe, if I remember right, had me on during that time as well. Another question here is from Shannon Haney. He said, Josh, do you believe that the hypersonic nuclear capability demonstrated by the CCP is actually more advanced than any of the U.S. weapons? If so, why would the military admit that? More CCP propaganda? So I should be clear on a couple of things. So the Chinese Communist Party launched and tested a hypersonic missile. It was able to allegedly travel the whole length, across the entire globe, and was able to hit a target within several miles. I can't remember the exact number, but within a decent number of miles. The concern about that is they're saying, U.S. officials are saying that we do not have the capability to defend against a missile carrier like that. That if China, for example, were to put a nuclear warhead on a hypersonic missile, our own defensive systems would probably not be able to intercept it. Now, that's a very bizarre thing to say. That's a very risky thing to say because, the whole point of nuclear weapons is preventive. It's preventative. It's to assure, mutually assured destruction if anyone were to ever use them. But if you have a country suddenly that can launch them and destroy an adversary so fast that the other country cannot retaliate in time or cannot intercept them while that entire, mutually assured destruction protection is gone. So it is a very bizarre thing that they would announce publicly that we don't have the ability to defend against it. Now, remember as well that Russia actually also tested a very similar system. In fact, I believe less than a month ago. Russia also tested a hypersonic ballistic missile, which they launched from a submarine. North Korea also came out of the woodworks and launched also a missile from a submarine. In other words, these three countries, all to a degree, different degrees, Russia probably the least of the three, but still, are U.S. adversaries. And all three of them simultaneously launching missile tests, demonstrating their ability to launch nuclear weapons using these missiles, is a pretty serious concern, especially as it relates to nuclear-capable ballistic missile technology, especially hypersonic, which we can't counter. Now, a couple important things to note with military stuff. It's been told to me by several people. I was a national security reporter for many, many years. A lot of military news is actually fake. And hear me out. A lot of military news is disinformation, even from the United States. At least it used to be. I don't know if that's still the case. A lot of what the Chinese Communist Party announces, a lot of what other countries announce, a lot of it's fake. A lot of it's to, for example, propose different ideas, and they'll announce it on military niche websites and discussion boards because they want to basically get a sounding board from experts discussing the possible pros and cons of such military technologies. They want to get a sounding board of it. They want to mislead their adversaries. Different militaries, even including the U.S. military, will sometimes release photographs, leaked or intentionally leaked, that are totally fake, that are totally meant for the purpose of disinformation. And I'm not talking about, the current use of the word disinformation. I mean real disinformation. Technically misinformation in this case, because misinformation is the seeding of actual false information with the intention of causing confusion or discrediting something. This is common practice. This is common practice even in the United States. It's common practice, especially in China. And I would say, as what a lot of experts, that the Chinese military does, in some regards, appear to be more of a paper tiger. A lot of stuff they announce probably cannot function as they claim it would. A lot of stuff is not nearly as good as they would like to say it is, including, for example, their fifth-generation fighter jets, which, based on even surface analysis, are probably not fifth-generation fighter jets, even though they're credited as such. Does that mean we should not take it seriously, though? No, not at all. The U.S. should take it seriously and should prepare for it as if it were a serious threat, on par with what they're claiming, because it's only by doing so that we can prepare for what they might be developing. Now, does China have the capability to launch hypersonic missiles? They might. It's possible. Who knows in reality, but it does look like they can. They do have hypersonic carrier destroyers, missiles that can destroy, for example, aircraft carriers. Keep in mind as well, folks, that a lot of the U.S. warships are not even armored, or very lightly armored. That was I believe, Bush era policy going back, the not putting proper armoring on our warships, because the assessment at that time was that essentially if there was ever a large scale war between, powerful first world nations, it would be a nuclear war. And if it's a nuclear war, you don't have to have armoring on ships because they're all going to be destroyed anyways. Very bizarre thinking. But it does mean that our warships would be vulnerable to weapons like that, or even lesser weapons of that sort. In other words, we should take it seriously. But again, there is in fact a lot of misinformation when it comes to military news globally, not just the US, not just China, but globally. A lot of countries seed false information about military capabilities. It's very common. Another question here. Let's see. This is from Ashley. Ashley E. You said, "Hi, Josh. Any insight on why the government is having farmers burn their crops? Are they causing these shortages for Agenda 2030? I have not seen those reports. If that is true, that's very significant. I will look into that. If farmers are being told to burn their crops, that's pretty serious, especially because you just had a drought in Brazil, which supplies most of the food to China. And also you have guys like Bill Gates buying up farmland across the United States. That would be very serious. Who knows? I need to look into that, though, because I have not confirmed that. And I have not been able to verify. I haven't checked that out yet. I haven't heard that yet. I will look into that, though. Another is planned where many are going to talk about their COVID-19 vaccine side effects on November 2nd in Washington. You said, I heard react19.org. You said, I heard react19.org is helping to organize the same. Maybe this will impact the vaccine mandates. We'll see. The reality is, well, as we've been mentioning, people don't have a platform on which they can discuss things like this. You can't, if you're on Google and you write about this and let's say you have a media outlet and you write about this and you're on Google, Google might, downgrade your search ranking because of it. If you're on Facebook and you talk about this, you could get kicked off Facebook. If you're on YouTube and you talk about this, you can get a strike, or they can delete your channel. It's happened to people. In other words, any place you would normally talk about this stuff, you can be censored, you can be canceled, you can have your business go out of business if you talk about it. And so there's no current place online other than individual websites where this can be discussed. In other words, even if an event is held, and I know there have been many events like this, even if an event is held, it's like a tree falling in the woods, but nobody's there to hear it. Did it really happen? Even if it's held, unless a lot of people can hear it, it's not going to have a big impact. But I would say that's where Trump's social media may come into use. That if Trump, for example, does launch his own social network, which he's saying is going to do, we're still playing. That's very strange. Sorry about that, folks. We had an issue just now happen. We can't assume that if Trump launches his own video platform, again, Trump Social, that by doing so, that will give people the ability to talk. And if people can talk, that can then start to impact politics. Once people have a voice, once people can discuss, and once they can see the, let's say, weight and size of political opinion, that's when you start having real impact on politics. And so hopefully we'll see what happens if media becomes less censored, or Trump launches a social network and it creates an alternative and people's voices can be heard once again on both sides of the aisle. It can start having impacts like that. We'll see, though. Another question here from Slayer Aces. He said, Josh, what's to keep the Dems from cheating and running some scam to get Trump's new platform taken down or blocked, especially since it appears no one is really standing up to them? Well, so the big concern is that Trump's new social network, once he releases it, is going to get parlored. Parler being an independent social media platform that is currently available once again, but was killed as a business. They're not significant anymore. Their business was killed because right after Trump, of course, left office, there was the January 6th incident, and you had all these different media groups, news outlets, politicians, social networking websites accusing Parler of having been partially responsible for helping people organize to protest on January 6th. It's total nonsense because, as information has shown, most of the organizing for anybody looking to attend the event, which was, again, a publicly announced event, again, Trump's protest, which did turn to people entering the Capitol building. It was a public event. Most of that was actually organized on Facebook. And so why was Parler canceled, but Facebook was not canceled, right? It was a very strange incident. Why was Parler canceled, but Facebook was not? Big question to ask. Again, what happened is that all these different companies used that narrative and they shut off Parler, Amazon Web Services, Apple, so on. They canceled the entire back end. Now, since then, a few things have happened. A lot of private companies have emerged which can provide the back-end server-side infrastructure for websites like that, for services like that. In other words, Trump, if he wanted to, he wouldn't have to use Amazon Web Services. He wouldn't have to use Apple. He wouldn't have to use a lot of these technologies because there are already now alternatives to them. And that is only needed if he's not building these things himself, which he might do. In his own words, part of this is going to be launching his own answer to big tech. And part of that is going to be the technology platforms through which you could launch things like this, we would assume. We'll see what happens, but the chances of them being able to parlor Trump's site is very, very thin. Unless they get to target like the real deep back-end technologies, we'll have to see. One sec. Another question here is from Riley Stern. He said, "Let's go, Brandon." And from Linda Manning, he said, "Question, did you hear about Panama catching 50 or more Taliban on the way to U.S. and Biden threatening Panama?" I did not see the articles about the 50 Taliban on the way to the U.S. from Panama. What I can say, though, is that in Panama and a lot of other countries, you actually have political parties run by terrorist organizations. You have, for example, Hamas and Hezbollah, very powerful throughout Latin America, sometimes even having actual political parties. The tri-border region, you have organizations that are narco-terror organizations. Iran is very powerful in Latin America. And yes, you do have active narco-terrorist organizations working in that region who would be interested in sending terrorists to the United States. And as we speak right now, in addition to Democrats, Biden administration admitting on record, including Jen Psaki during a press conference, admitting that they've actually been transporting at least young people. They say it's kids, but it's up to people 20 years old-ish, that they've been transporting them to different parts of the United States. They've admitted this now, including transporting them from the border to New York. So they're working on that. Another question from Jay Dirksen. He said, "Josh, have you seen the UK government site saying double vaccines will reduce your immune system to 0 by Christmas?" We'll see, folks. Some interesting things going on with that. One thing that they're doing right now is they're also saying you can mix and match vaccines. And so you can get, for example, the Pfizer vaccine and then the Johnson & Johnson booster shot. Something they were saying initially people shouldn't do, they're now saying you can do. So we'll see what happens with that. One of the big concerns is the way that the vaccines would affect your immune system. Part of the way the mRNA vaccine system works is it basically teaches part of your immune system to focus solely on one particular issue, COVID, and in particular, one particular variant of COVID. And if you've the impact of making your immune system not being more robust, more able to focus on additional threats, such as, for example, variants of the virus or other things. We'll see what it means as people continue to get vaccines, and as they continue to do that. We'll also see what it means as the effect of the vaccines wear off, because as they've been mentioning, there is a fall off, a drop off of the effectiveness of the vaccines just several months into getting them. So we'll see. Another question here from not my Halo. You said, being that Biden administration purchased security are actually here, why would this administration do this from China? That is a very bizarre move, for a few different reasons. So yes, there have been stories about this, that the Biden administration has been using drones and surveillance technology purchased from China. Now, they should know better than this. Even going back to the Obama administration, I think it was probably around 2010-ish, when the when the Obama administration was looking into possible, I don't know, is the video not good here, folks? Sorry, I'm using hotel internet. I have an additional internet system I bring with me. Next time I'm traveling, I'll use the alternative one. I apologize if that things are sticking out with us tonight. I do have an alternative. I'll use that next time I'm traveling. I apologize. On this question, though, talking about the again, Biden administration using Chinese drones and other surveillance technology. Part of the problem we have with that is supply chain threats. And going back to 2010, 2011, there were actual military tests, investigations done on supply chain threats, especially from China. Remember what happened during that time? They were looking into parts being used in actual military technology coming from China, such as chips, such as could have threats. The whole big initiative, the administration started it to those problems. The Trump administration then raised the same issues several years later. And during the Trump administration, they also had the same issue where they could not fully close those threats. Now we see that the Biden administration is doing something else, where they're not only not trying to get rid of that, but they're even buying equipment directly from China, which could have the issue of creating additional supply chain threats because they're buying that technology. Some of the stuff's been happening for a long time, but again, buying it directly from them makes it a lot worse. Yeah, I apologize, folks, if the internet's not good. Again, next time I'm traveling, I'll be sure to use a separate internet system. Usually hotels are decent, but again, it's hit or miss depending on where I'm staying. All right, folks, I'll get a couple more stories for the night because it's getting late. I want to talk about Evergrande real quick, though. Now, we've been talking about Evergrande, this large Chinese real estate company that is essentially being kind of the canary in the coal mine for the Chinese economy. Because if Evergrande goes down, this is a brick in a wall. And again, it's one of many bricks within the wall, but it could be a sounding board for the secure, so let's say the integrity of the entire wall. The hypothetical wall in this case being the entire Chinese economy linked up to the global economy, including the US economy. Now it says here, $2.6 billion deal for China, Evergrande collapses. Shares set to slide 10.5%. Now, they were already anticipating an 8% drop in Evergrande. It's now up to a 10.5% drop. And folks, that's already almost an 80% drop in its valuation over the past, over the past year. Meaning that the Chinese real estate industry itself, which is close to 30% of the Chinese GDP, the Chinese real estate industry is falling apart. If that falls apart, take that in context as well. With the global shipping crisis, which Pete Buttigieg, basically until the pandemic and the lockdowns are over, which they're saying is not going to end until they get like 98% vaccination or even complete vaccination. In other words, probably never, meaning that there's no end in sight for the supply chain crisis and for the other issues that are also exacerbated by this problem and by others, meaning, well, the financial system is in serious, serious jeopardy and no end of that road in sight. Now, in California, Governor Newsom is trying to reduce the pressure on the ports, trying to get ships to be able to drop off their containers is something the Biden administration is doing. In California, they're trying to make it more easy for trucks to get those shipments and deliver them. We'll see if that works. Also, folks, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta is now cutting its forecast on gross domestic product, GDP growth, for the United States, meaning that even for the United States, they're anticipating not just inflation, not just anticipating other issues like this, they're also anticipating a drop in GDP. In other words, this financial crisis we've been discussing for a long time is on our doorstep now. It does appear that it's here. Now, at the same time, I want to talk about real quick. I mentioned what Pete Buttigieg is saying. Let me explain this. He's saying these supply chain issues will persist as long as there's a pandemic. You know, folks, and this is not even just the United States. Even if the United States were to, let's say, lift all the restrictions until the entire world lifts the restrictions, this is going to be ongoing. Now, this is what it says. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg predicted more supply chain bottlenecks, saying they will continue as long as the pandemic continues. And this is what he's saying. He says, if a shoe factory closes in Vietnam in September for a COVID outbreak, you're going to see the effect of that at the mall in December or January. And this is, again, he's receiving criticism for taking leave and so on. He said this during a TV interview on Wednesday. Think about that, folks. He's saying that if a shoe factory closes in Vietnam, maybe through, let's say, government mandates requiring a shutdown because they fear there's an outbreak and they want to lock things down again, shut things down again, which they're currently doing across China, which a lot of other countries are doing. If one country closes down a certain industry, closes down a big company, the effects of that are going to be felt globally. And based on this, he's saying the supply chain bottlenecks, not even just the impact on the economy, but the supply chain itself, is going to be continuing as long as we have this pandemic. And that's not, again, even just, on whether the U.S. opens up. This is on whether every single country on earth fully opens up. This is the global picture in terms of the impact of this. And also, folks, on that, we've been saying for a while that they're trying to get clearance now, trying to get approval to give the vaccine to kids. The Biden administration is now working to make this happen. The Biden administration is planning for mass vaccination of children in the United States ages 5 to 11. Let me explain. It says here, President Joe Biden's administration is planning a large-scale rollout of COVID-19 vaccines for children as young as 5 years old, officials announced on October 20th. The administration has secured enough doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to vaccinate all of the country's 28 million children in the United States between the ages of 5 and 11, and is prepared to ship the doses across the country to facilitate vaccination efforts, the White House stated. Get ready for it, folks. Also saying vaccine doses will be made available at doctors' offices, pharmacies, and schools. Your kid can get vaccinated at school, they're saying, possibly, among other sites in addition to that. The Children's Hospital Association has also agreed to set up sites at more than 100 children hospital systems. So, folks, there have been claims of parents in the United States, in other countries, saying that kids were sent to school and kids were getting vaccinated without the knowledge or approval of the parents. Schools, if schools themselves can give out vaccinations as they are planning to do, we'll see how this works out in the United States, whether parents can have a say on whether the child chooses whether or not to get vaccinated. Typically in the United States, the guardian, the guardian of the kids is the one who is able to make those decisions, medical decisions for the kids. But we'll see what happens with this. Because they're going to start doing this in the United States, again, for ages 5 to 11. And we'll also see what happens with kids who choose to not get vaccinated. One problem you have, folks, with the public school system is when you're talking about, let's say, government jobs. Again, the vaccine mandates are especially rolled out right now for military, for government workers, for people, for, let's say, doctors who are working in the state or the federal funded hospital system, for teachers who are working in the federal funded public education system. If your kid is part of the public system financed by the federal government, they could also possibly face these types of mandates as well, because again, it's being run through that federal system. We'll see what happens with it. We'll see if they can mandate it. We'll see how it holds up when it comes to the Supreme Court. But this is currently where it's heading. All right, folks, that said, always a lot to talk about, always a lot more stories we can get into. Pleasure as always. We'll end it here tonight because it's getting late. I do apologize again for the poor internet connection. It might be the hotel. Going forward, again, I do travel with an alternative internet setup. I'll start using that to replace the hotel internet because it's hit or miss at hotels. Thanks for sticking it out regardless. Also, folks, we have another great episode I'll tell you about. Victor Davis Hanson, you might have heard of him. He had a very interesting show on American Thought Leaders where he's talking about the era of intimidation. I'll show you the trailer for that at the end of this video. But folks, in the meantime, it's always a pleasure. As always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.
A very dangerous pre-civilizational pathology is tribalism. The idea that you identify with the person who has superficial affinities with you, i.e. appearance, or skin color, or hair color, or eye color, or linguistic commonalities. So I hire my first cousin and not the other person who's better qualified because he's part of the tribe. We've gone back in a retrograde fashion to a pre-civilization mentality.
Today I sit down with classicist and historian Victor Davis Hanson to discuss his latest book, The Dying Citizen: How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek.